Hello and welcome to Man Cave Media. On this channel I talk about beer, sneakers, tech, and toys. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. Also, please connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram at media.mancave and on Facebook and Twitter at mancavemedia.org. And finally, if you enjoy listening to podcasts, please check out the League of Sedentary Gentlemen. We're available wherever you get your podcasts or direct from our website at man-cave-media.org. Alright, so on this channel, I mostly talk about beer, sneakers, tech, and toys, and now sometimes I talk about my truck. I recently bought a new-to-me 2017 Ford F-150, and I'm doing my first upgrade, which is a cold air intake. Oh my goodness. Let's check it out. I'm going to leave the box on the ground for a moment because it is an absolute beast, and it is overpowering my small little table here. So the intake that I decided to go with is an AFE Magnum Force with the dry filter. So I have a few reasons why I chose the dry filter. I'll get into that more in a little bit, and also several reasons why I chose this particular filter. It's kind of hard living in Southern California to get a cold air intake that is CARB legal. There are plenty of affordable options out there for non-CARB legal, but good luck getting them to ship them to your house in California. So that being said, I was looking over my options for the best CARB legal intake for the money, and after reading several reviews and going through pages and pages of blog posts and such, it led me to this AFE intake. They do make two different versions, one with the wet or oiled filter and another one with the dry filter that does not use the oil. It is still cleanable and reusable, but it just doesn't need oil on the filter. And I mean, I've had both in the past. The oiled ones, they do tend to make a mess. I don't know. I like the idea of having the dry filter, and so that's why I decided to go with the dry one. But anyhow, let's go ahead and get this unit unboxed, and so we can check it out. Oh man! All right. So as I mentioned, this thing absolutely dwarfs my table. So we're gonna do this a little different. It's not even in the shot for my other camera. It's ridiculous. This thing is huge. Huge. After a quick battery change, I am back, and as you can see, there is a lot to this thing. My goodness. This is an absolute unit. So if you couldn't tell by the shape of the intake, my Ford F-150 has the 2.7 liter Ecoboost, which I know you diehard V8 fans out there are shaking your head, but it is a lot of fun to drive. It's got a lot of torque, and the torque comes on really low in the RPM range, and it is just a ton of fun to drive. But anyways, aside from that, this is not a video about the differences in F-150 models. This is a video about the air intake. So it includes this metal box. One of the things that sold me on this intake, several models, actually several brands I should say, of intakes for the F-150 utilize the factory airbox, the bottom half anyway, and they include this metal frame, and it looks like it's powder coated. It's pretty nice actually. And the intake itself sits inside here, and this sits on top of the factory airbox, which is pretty cool. That's one of the things that sold me on it. As I go through this stuff, I'm going to set it off the table because it's just too much. Right, and we have the intake itself. Which is just massive. There's the intake itself. There's the AFE logo. Pretty cool. It says AFE power on the side. And for those of you who are not familiar with Ford's EcoBoost engines, it is a twin turbo V6. So that's why the weird shape. One tube goes to one turbo, the other tube goes to the other turbo. And there you go. This side has the filter, so it sits like this. Actually, if you're looking at the truck, the engine from the front of the truck, it will sit like this. Airbox here, tubes here. Pretty cool. It's got a spot for the factory airflow sensor. So you pull it out, and I believe it comes with a rubber grommet, and you just slap it right in there, which is cool. The other thing that kind of set this down. Another thing that kind of sold me on a cold air intake for the Ford F-150 is the type of air sensor that it has. You don't really require a tune. When you swap out the factory air box and you introduce more air into the system, the sensor actually senses more air coming in and adds fuel. So you don't really require a tune to get the benefits of a cold air intake. My previous car, which was a Subaru Legacy, if you were to change out the intake to a cold air style intake, you would have to tune it to get any benefit from it whatsoever. So I never did it because it felt like a waste of money. It was a stock, naturally aspirated 2.5 liter Subaru Legacy. I was never going to do anything to it. There was no way I was ever going to pay to get it tuned. And so I just never changed the intake. But on a vehicle like the Ford F-150, the type of sensor that it uses, you can take advantage of a cold air intake without tuning it. So that's the other thing that sold me on it. So moving on, other parts included in here. We have silicone grommet. They include two of these, obviously. There are two pipes. Very nice, good quality. Here's the other one. That's weird. One's wrapped in really thin plastic. The other one's wrapped in kind of thick plastic. Kind of strange. Whatevs. Yep. Yeah, good quality. I dig it. And this looks like, what is this? Ooh. Oh man, I hate these cheap Ziploc bags. They never just open. They always tear. Oh, this is so they give you like this weather strip material that goes around the top of the metal airbox. So, and last bag, we have hose clamps. They include 1, 2, 3, 4 hose clamps. And then this is the rubber grommet that I was talking about for the air sensor. Go ahead and take it out. So that's pretty cool. There's also some hardware in here. I'm not exactly sure what that's for. I'm gonna have to RTFM to figure that part out. So last bit here, I think we all know what this is gonna be. filter itself. More paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork with this thing. As I mentioned before, this is an absolute unit. Like, I know the F-150 is a very large truck, but this air intake is just, I mean, it's massive, and there's so many parts involved in this thing. Kind of crazy. All right. So there's another large diameter hose clamp on the filter itself. This is the filter. The dry one is kind of a grayish white color. The wet one, I believe, is blue. Again, both reusable. Just because it's dry doesn't mean it's not reusable. It just doesn't require any oil after you clean it. So one of these, I hope, is my CARB legal information. Go through this stuff here really quick. My goodness, I hate these Ziploc bags, man. All right, this is warranty status. What's this one here? My goodness. There we go. Let's see. Another warranty registration. That's kind of strange. I guess they warranty the filter separate. It's the only thing I could think of. Right. Oh, there it is. That's what I needed. So for those of you who live in Southern California, you know exactly what this is. This is the CARB legal sticker that I have to show the smog guy so that Captain Planet doesn't come and kick me in the dick. Love Southern California. Beautiful weather. All right. This is also just instructions. Yes, some very detailed instructions. If you've ever swapped out a factory intake for a cold air setup, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. When you've done one, you've done them all. The few extra steps that involved in this one is because of the twin turbos, so there's an extra tube. And then of course that metal box that takes advantage of the factory air box, that's a different step as well. But other than that, it's pretty basic stuff. If you've never installed one before, watch the rest of this video because I'm going to record myself installing it. What else? Oh, let's go over specs really quick. So on their product page, they claim, let's see, increased horsepower and torque. They don't give exact numbers. And let's see, what else? No tune needed, which is one of the things that sold me on a cold air intake for my F-150. Retro molded plastic. That's the material that it's made out of, and it is absolutely huge. That's pretty much it. Application 2015 through 2020 2.7 liter Ford F-150 EcoBoost models. Most of the cold air intakes, they also claim better gas mileage, and a lot of the reviews that I read, most people noted that they were getting better gas mileage, so I'm kind of excited for that. One of the main reasons why I chose the 2.7 liter EcoBoost was for gas mileage. Coming from a small sedan, I was a little bit concerned about the difference in gas price, but because I was coming from a Subaru, surprisingly enough, the 2.7 EcoBoost does not do that much worse than the Subaru. With my Legacy, my commute to work is mostly side streets. I don't really take highways a lot, and so I was averaging around 20 to 21 miles per gallon with my Legacy, and that's just an all-wheel drive system. It's very taxing on gas mileage. And with the EcoBoost, I've only had it for about 3 weeks, and I'm averaging 18 miles per gallon. So, I mean, not bad for when you consider a Legacy, you know, small four-door sedan, F-150, big truck. I know they use aluminum panels, so that helps with the fuel economy, but when you think about it, I mean, curb weight is way different, and also it's kind of amazing that the horsepower and torque difference from this truck to my Subaru, but the Subaru was a 2.5 liter and the EcoBoost is a 2.7 liter. So the GDI I know is helping out, but those twin turbos, man, that's the way to go. I think V6 twin turbo is nice middle ground for horsepower versus gas mileage. I know there's a lot of diehard V8 fans out there, and I know that the 5.0 Coyote is an excellent motor and it sounds really nice compared to the EcoBoost, but I wanted that gas mileage and I wanted that low end torque because that makes it really fun to drive. So anyhow, let's go ahead and get out and get this thing installed. I'm excited to see how it goes in, and I'm excited to see the changes in engine noise. And then after a couple of weeks, maybe a month, I will report back and see if I'm seeing any changes in gas mileage. But anyhow, let's go ahead and get this installed. All right, so the instructions call for doing as much assembly outside of the truck as possible before you actually install it. So we're gonna go ahead and do that right now. So first we have the metal air box and the piece of weather strip that they give you. I'm gonna go ahead and install this around the outside edges. So this corner is fighting me a lot. It's a little bit tough getting it on there, but I mean, if you negotiate with it enough, eventually it will go. All right, after a little bit of negotiation with the screwdriver, I'm happy with how it is. So go ahead and move on. So the tube itself attaches to the airbox with two included screws, one regular washer and a lock washer. There's no nut involved. The holes on the airbox are threaded, so you just kind of gotta. It's a little bit awkward because the air tube itself is so large and it's kind of slippery, so it's a little bit awkward to get it started. But once you get it going, there's really no good way to hold the thing. So once you get it going, you can turn it by hand, and I left it a little bit loose. Can tighten it by hand with a 10 mil socket. Like I said, I left it just a little bit loose until I got the second side in, and then I tightened both sides down. So once both sides are in, went ahead and snugged them both down. All right, now let's go ahead and install the filter. Again, because of the overall size of the intake itself, and because it's kind of slippery to hold onto, this was pretty awkward. Learn from my mistake and kind of tighten down the hose clamp a little bit before you actually try to install it, because they leave the hose clamp so large. that I actually did not notice that it slipped off the backside as I was tightening it, and I had to loosen it up and start over. So if I had to do this over again, I would definitely tighten that hose clamp a little bit before attempting to install it, because it's kind of awkward. See, right about here, I'm wondering why it's taking so damn long to tighten. And right about here, I notice it actually is slipping off on the backside. Whoops. Yeah. So like I said, learn from my mistake. Tighten this thing up before you actually try to install it, because it was a royal pain in my you-know-what. So I loosened it just enough to slide it back over, and once it's tightened down a little bit, you can just hold it with your finger as you tighten it down the rest of the way, and then you don't have an issue. So it's just initially when the hose clamp is so loose that it slides around too easy, and the whole unit is just so big it's kind of awkward to work on it. So once that's nice and snug, I'm going to move on to the silicone sleeves here, but this is another one of those learn from my mistakes moments. I put the silicone sleeves on before putting it in the truck, and I'm going to tell you now, don't do that. And you'll see why in a moment. All right, with assembly done on this, now we can turn our attention to the grommet. They include like a rubber grommet that you just push the air sensor into, the factory air sensor. All right, now we're turning our attention to the factory air box. I'm gonna go ahead and remove it. The factory air filter, not too bad. I was told when I bought the truck that it was just replaced. Look for any kind of debris in the air box. Okay, what I forgot to show, actually I did a little bit of a cutaway because I had to go switch my laundry around, and I forgot to turn the camera back on before I popped that sensor off, the air sensor on the factory air box. So my apologies for that. It's just a clip. You push in the tab and pull it out. It's very simple. Now, I don't know if the previous owner had an aftermarket intake or if this was done at the factory, but one of the hose clamps is facing the wrong direction. It's facing towards the firewall. That's kind of a pain. But I mean, there's plenty of room to work, especially if you have the 2.7 like I do. There's plenty of room to work. But it's still kind of a pain. Would be nice if it was facing the right way. So once the hose clamps are loose, you just kind of wiggle it out. A little bit of negotiating, but for the most part, it just pops right out. Now, another thing I wanted to mention, I was told by a few people in various Ford F-150 forums that I should remove these air baffles, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So the larger one was easy to remove. The smaller one is kind of a pain. It's in there pretty good. At first I thought it might be like a twist lock situation, but it was just in there really tight, so I needed to do a little bit of negotiating with the screwdriver. But I was able to get it out. It's just in there really tight. And yes, I did break it. But I wasn't too concerned about it because I knew I was not going to be reusing it. So after you get it out about a 1/2 inch with the screwdriver, you can kind of wiggle it out. So here's the sensor, and it's a twist lock. Mine was pretty snug in there. I tried to twist it by hand and it wouldn't go. So if you take you'll see me do this in a moment. If you take a flathead screwdriver and push it against that tab, you can get it to rotate. See, there it goes. See, I was told that you would be able to do it by hand, but mine was really snug. So again, I don't know if the previous owner had an aftermarket intake, and so they had it out, and when they put it back in, maybe it was a little bit crooked. I'm not sure why, but it was really snug. All right, so the factory sensor just pushes into this rubber grommet here. And once you get that tab, the same tab that I pushed with the screwdriver, once you get that past the rubber grommet, it is actually pretty snug. So now you're going to see why I said don't put the silicone connectors on. Alright, so here you are about to see why I say do not put these silicone sleeves on beforehand, because it is actually kind of a pain in the neck to fit these around the air tubes when they're on the intake already. Much easier to fit them on prior to putting it on. It takes me a little bit, I'm kind of stubborn. It takes me a little while to realize I just need to take it off and put it on the air tube first. So learn from my mistake. Don't try to do it this way. So this is the way you should do it from the get-go. Before you even put the intake into the engine bay, put the silicone connectors on the air tubes prior to even setting the intake into the engine bay. Also, this goes without saying, I pointed the logo, the AFE logo, out so you could see it, and I also pointed the hose clamps out properly so that you can access the screws easily, which they failed to do so at the factory, or maybe the previous owner failed to do so if they had an aftermarket intake. At any rate, the factory one was not pointed outward. So once you have the silicone connector on the factory air tube, or rather on the air tube, it slides right back onto the intake side very easily. So I recommend doing it in that order. Much easier than the other way I was trying to do it. And again, kind of like with the air filter itself, they leave these hose clamps really big. So another thing I should have done, and I recommend that you do before you even try to put it on, is tighten the clamps down a bit, so that you're not trying to hold it in place and tighten it down the way I am right here, because they just leave so much slack on them. It's kind of ridiculous. So the lower tube, as you can see, I did not learn from my mistake, and I'm just trying to do it the way that I was trying to do the top one. But luckily, the lower tube has a little bit more give to it, and I was able to slide it on that way. I didn't have to take it off and put the silicone connector on first. I didn't have to do it that way for the lower tube. It just kind of slid right on. And then again, you can't really see, my arm is blocking, but the hose clamp is just, it's big, so it falls out of the way. It's kind of a pain. So before you even attempt to do this, I would just adjust those hose clamps down so they kind of stay put. But they're still, still loose enough to slide it over the pipe, but tight enough so that they're not moving around like crazy when you're trying to tighten them. And again, with this guy, point the logo out and then point the hose clamp so that you can get at it with a screwdriver easily. I guess that goes without saying. Most people figure that. So now that everything's in place, I'm just straightening out the clamps, making sure that everything's fine and lined up the way I want it. This clamp is a little bit crooked. I'm gonna slide this clamp around so that they're even, just for my OCD. All right, and lastly, yes, the airbox takes advantage of the factory clips, and you just have to kind of slide it down into place. I didn't notice that it wasn't sitting exactly right how it was supposed to sit, so I actually fought with it for a few minutes before I figured it out. And then once you figure it out, they just snap right on, just like the factory airbox. And what it was there's two tabs on the opposite side of where these clips are, and I did not notice that they were sitting above the slots where they needed to be. But like I said, once I figured that out, they just kind of snapped into place and everything was fine. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it might actually be better if you align this and get it snapped onto the factory airbox before you install it to the air tubes, attach it to the air tubes rather. I think if you went that route, you wouldn't struggle with this part as much as I did. Goes. Once I got it figured out, they snap into place and we're good to go. All right, I'm gonna do a couple of sound clips. I completely forgot to do some before sound clips. My apologies. I'm not gonna put the factory one back on just for the sake of doing that. So that install was relatively painless. A few things that I would do differently if I had to do it again. Those silicone sleeves, I know there's another name for those, I can't think of it, but really you don't want to put those on the intake itself beforehand. You want to put them on the air tubes first and then install the intake with those tubes already there. That was a hard lesson learned. And another thing that I would do differently is the fastening it to the factory airbox. I would do that before attaching it to the air tubes. I fought with that a little bit. There's two tabs on, if you're looking at it this way, there's two tabs on the left-hand side that sort of slide down and go into some grooves, and I completely missed it. I didn't notice that those were there. So I fought with that for a few minutes. It was a little bit frustrating, but it all worked out. Like I said, relatively easy. The sound clip doesn't really do it justice. So, of course, you can't hear this when the engine's not under load, but I took it for a ride around the block, and man, this thing really wakes up the turbos on the 2.7 liter EcoBoost. Get so much more noise. The sound is much better. As far as like horsepower or torque increases, like I don't think it's enough for you to feel it. I definitely didn't feel any difference. It's still, I mean, the 2.7 is very peppy. It's a very fun car to drive. Very fun truck to drive, rather. Very fun motor. It's very fast. Lots of low end torque, and so I don't think it was enough for me to notice. It feels pretty much the same. Most of the difference is the sound. You definitely hear the turbos more. It's pretty fun, especially on deceleration. Actually, when you lift off the throttle, you do hear the turbos, and it's pretty nice. It's pretty cool. And another thing they claim, the gas mileage part of it, I won't know, of course, for a couple weeks. Maybe after I go through a couple tanks of gas, I might notice a difference. So maybe after a month or so, I'll do a follow-up video letting you know if I see any differences in gas mileage or not. But for now, so far I'm happy with my purchase. Again, it's a little bit pricey, but all cold air intakes are when you live in Southern California because of smog laws here, so it is what it is. I'm still happy with my purchase. Just waking up those turbos a little bit and the sound alone was worth it to me. If there's any gas mileage savings with this cold air intake, that's just a bonus. But yeah, very happy with my purchase. All right, that's all I have for this one. Thank you again for stopping by. Please smash that like button if you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great afternoon, and like always, thank you for watching.